You are lying still, suspended between sleep and waking. The weight of the rough wool blanket feels comforting, yet slightly abrasive against your skin, a tactile reminder of simple materials and necessary warmth. You do not wake with a sudden jerk or even an alarm. Rather, you drift up slowly, as if ascending through cool layers of water. This movement is gentle, gradual, measured by the slow deepening of silence that seems to accumulate before dawn's first hesitant light. Your breathing deepens subtly, moving from the shallow breaths of repose into something deeper, more conscious. You are fully aware of the chill in the air that finds its way through the narrow gaps between the rough-hewn timbers of the building, carrying with it the cool, earthy scent of damp stone. This coolness touches your exposed skin, particularly along your wrists and the arch of your feet, making you acutely aware of the enclosed space you inhabit. The stillness inside the chamber is profound, broken only by sounds that feel distant and peripheral. There is a rhythmic clinking, perhaps the movement of wood or tools in an adjacent room, a loose latch closing, maybe stacked firewood shifting on its own weight. Further off, beneath the thick stone walls, you detect the muted, steady wash of water. It might be washing over stones, or simply dripping from some overhead basin. These small sounds act like anchors, tethering you softly to the reality that surrounds your quiet state. You lie there for a long time, suspended in this liminal space, watching the edges of your own consciousness sharpen. You are studying the way the limited light filters through the single window opening, not bright yet, but possessing a pale, pearly hue, the color of wet pewter. This preliminary light does little to illuminate, serving mostly to emphasize shadow and depth, playing across the irregular textures of the wall stone and the wooden beams overhead. You recall the complete weightlessness of sleep, that deep immersion where thought processes seem suspended in slow motion. Now, slowly, the memories of those passing hours begin to surface. The vague comfort, the deep sighing breath, the feeling of having been entirely held by rest's embrace. It is a distinct transition, moving from the unstructured fluidity of dream logic into the hard-edged reality of physical existence. A slight movement catches your attention. Maybe it was merely a settling draft, or perhaps another person shifting in their sleep nearby. You focus on the feeling beneath you, the mattress, if there is one, topped by the rough woolen covering and layered upon the cool feel of the stone floor that rises just beyond the bed's edge. The textures speak of practical necessity. Everything here is meant to endure, to withstand the seasons, the dampness, and the passage of many bodies. You shift slightly beneath the blankets, testing the contours of your body against the confines of sleep's lingering grip. This movement, small as it is, feels momentous, a quiet act of re-entry into being. You consider the simple necessity of breathing in the cool air. Each breath draws in not just oxygen, but the combined sense of old wood smoke, cold earth, and the faint, mineral scent unique to stone that has absorbed centuries of moisture. The air feels heavier than it does in the day's full warmth, imbued with a damp chill that promises effort and eventual heat. The initial task, before any conscious thought about the day's obligations can settle upon you, is simply this: to observe the quiet process of waking up itself. It is an invisible ritual, known only to those who inhabit these early hours, connecting the deepest rest with the slow anticipation of morning labor. You recognize in this gentle stirring a primal rhythm, one that predates clocks and schedules, the body's inherent understanding that the day will come, regardless of how deep or fragile the surrounding silence might feel. The faint sounds continue to guide you. The clinking comes again, maybe closer now, followed by a soft scraping noise, suggesting wood being dragged across stone. It is the preliminary soundscape of a community beginning its slow transition from night's quietude. You remain still, folding yourself into the available space beneath the coverings, not wanting to disrupt this fragile, beautiful moment of in-between time. You let your awareness settle on the sounds and the cool air, understanding that the waking process is itself an act of patient preparation, drawing you softly from the realm of dreams into the texture of a new day. The slow awakening teaches patience. It forces you to live within the space between moments, the silence between breaths, the pause between the clink of wood and the rush of water. You allow your mind to observe this architecture of quietude, finding a gentle rhythm in the waiting, readying yourself not just for movement, but for the careful structure of life that lies ahead. The morning air, which had felt so deep and cooling when you first woke, has shifted now. It carries a faint scent of wood smoke mixed with the sharp, damp smell of earth that never fully dries out in this corner of the world. You feel the lingering chill of sleep in your bones, a slow, pervasive coolness that requires simple movement to dispel. The time for simply waking is over. The time for readiness begins. You rise from the pallet. The woven rush mat beneath you whispers faintly against the cold stone floor. Your body moves slowly, each joint protesting slightly with a soft crackle that sounds very loud in the early quiet. You notice how the weak light filtering through the oiled parchment window is gray and diffused, catching the dust motes swirling lazily in the air. It is not enough sunlight to dispel true shadows, only to suggest their retreat. The first task draws you toward the small storage area where the kindling rests. These bundles of twigs, brittle and dry from careful stacking, are stacked near a hearth that has already cooled completely. You kneel down, gathering a few lengths. The wood is surprisingly light in your hands, smelling sharply of resin and decay, a smell fundamentally associated with life passing into another form, ready to be consumed by flame. You pick up the kindling, turning it over in your fingers. Some pieces are splintered, some hold their shape beautifully. You observe the varying textures, the rough bark resisting the fingertip, the smooth inner wood grain yielding easily. It is an inventory of utility, a careful sorting through potential energy waiting for ignition. Moving deeper into the dwelling, you reach the wash basin. Water collects here from several tasks performed throughout the night, scraps of rinsing and general spillage. The water is deep, cold, and smells faintly of clay and minerals. You dip your hands into it, feeling the immediate, shocking bite of the temperature. It is a cleansing shock that pulls you fully awake, rousing senses dulled by rest. The rhythm of washing becomes measured. First, the palms rub together under the running trickle, then the backs of the hands follow, moving with a steady, ingrained motion taught over countless mornings. You run your wrists beneath the cold flow, focusing on the sensation, the way the water temperature affects the deep creases in your skin. It is an act that grounds you to the immediate reality, acknowledging the body as a vessel that needs upkeep. You lift your face to the basin. The chill hits your cheeks immediately, raising goosebumps along your exposed skin despite the ambient warmth of the stone structure. You splash water across your forehead, noticing how the droplets run in quick, clean paths down the slope of your neck. It is not about purity so much as it is about ritual, a physical demarcation between the deep unconscious hours and the structured demands of the day. The small act of preparation takes time. You might use an old, soft linen cloth, running it slowly across your forearm, checking for any signs of dirt or weariness from yesterday's labors. The fabric feels slightly damp already, carrying the lingering moisture of previous uses. These simple ablutions, the wood gathering, the cold water washing, are anchors. They pull you away from the indistinct thoughts of sleep and anchor you into the present moment, making the abstract concept of today feel solid and tangible. Afterward, your gaze drifts around the room. You notice the utilitarian simplicity of everything. The rough-hewn wooden beams supporting the roof, darkened by smoke over decades, the small collection of earthenware jugs resting on a low shelf, the patterned weave of the blankets, faded where hands have frequently adjusted them. The quiet routine imposes an order upon the disorder of sleep. You stand up again, stretching deliberately, allowing your spine to articulate slowly from the lumbar curve upward. The joints pop softly in sequence, announcing the re-engagement with gravity and movement. This physical awakening mirrors a mental one, clearing away the fog of dreams into the crisp necessity of breath. You leave the main sleeping chamber, moving into the transitional space near the hearth. Though it is not time for the meal yet, you pause by the stones where heat lingers, observing the residual warmth absorbed into the material itself. The hearth speaks of countless mornings, of flames kindled when the air was thickest with frost, and of fire banked low when tiredness settled over the community. It is a silent witness to cyclical necessity. The lingering scent in this space changes now, the medicinal tang of pine needles mixed with cold ashes. You allow your breathing to deepen, matching its slow rhythm to the steady, gentle hiss of residual steam escaping from the cooled stones. The world outside the walls awaits, demanding careful presentation, but for this moment, you remain within the contained rhythm of preparation. You think about the passage of time not in hours or minutes, but in these distinct stages. The weighted silence before dawn, the sharp shock of cold water, the gathering energy from dry wood. Each step is a small refusal to linger in yesterday's state, a subtle commitment to the next movement, the next breath. This careful physical choreography sets the tone for everything that will follow, a deep respect for simple effort and necessary routine. You are becoming present, shedding the gentle fog of rest layer by deliberate layer. You sit down at the rough-hewn table, the wood cool and slightly gritty beneath your elbows. It is late morning now, but the light streaming through the window remains diffuse, having lost its initial crisp edge of dawn. The place feels settled after the hurried movements of preparation, the quiet scrape of the basins being rinsed, the low thud of wood being stacked nearby. You notice the grain of the tabletop, lines of history etched into the surface by generations of eating and working. Each ridge and dip tells a story you cannot read, but you can feel it beneath your fingertips. Before you rests the simple meal. It is not a celebration. It is merely what sustains the body for the tasks ahead. You lift the thick slab of bread. Its surface is dusted with flour, a fine powder that catches the weak light and seems almost luminescent. The smell rises from it, a deep, yeasty scent mixed faintly with wood smoke. When you break off a corner piece, the crumb structure reveals itself, coarse and irregular, bearing the slight grit of whole grains ground nearby. You dip your hand into the basin where the porridge was kept. The liquid is thick and warm, yielding slightly against the side of the bowl. You scoop up a small measure of it, watching the way the steam curls momentarily before dissipating into the air. It holds the faint, earthy scent of cooked oats and perhaps a touch of rendered animal fat used to enrich the meal. The taste, when you finally take a bite, is unadorned and steady, a warmth that begins in your stomach and spreads outwards, settling the minor ache left by the night's rest. The ritual of eating moves with deliberate slowness. You chew each mouthful fully, allowing the simple sustenance to ground you. There are no flourishes here, only function. The act demands nothing more than steady attention, focusing on the texture of the bread against your teeth, the smooth give of the porridge coating your tongue. It is a moment suspended outside the rush of time, anchored by basic biological necessity. As you finish, you look down at the few crumbs remaining on the rough wood. You gather them up with a practiced motion, wiping the table clean until it gleams faintly in the filtered light. This small act of cleaning feels satisfyingly complete. It is a boundary being drawn. Breakfast is over, and now the day's active rhythm must begin. You pause, simply observing the quiet that settles after the meal. The sounds around you are muted. Perhaps the distant clang of metal on stone from down the street, or the muffled clatter as someone walks heavily past your dwelling. These noises do not intrude. They merely confirm that the life outside continues its slow, unhurried turn. The lingering warmth in your core reminds you that this simple exchange of sustenance for energy is fundamental to existence. Every bite taken must be counted towards the labor ahead. You take a moment to feel the weight of the wooden stool beneath you, feeling it distribute the familiar pressure against your bones, connecting you physically to this spot in time and place. There is a particular sense of continuity that settles over you now, knowing that countless people before you have sat here, at this very table, performing this exact slow ceremony. Their needs were perhaps different. Their bread might have been coarser, their porridge mixed with richer ingredients, but the core rhythm remained identical. Waking, consuming, preparing for movement. You rise slowly from the stool. Your joints protest slightly, a faint reminder of gravity and inactivity. You stand up straight, noticing the way your spine adjusts to verticality after the relative ease of sitting. The floorboards feel solid and cool under the soles of your feet, transmitting the subtle coolness of the day into your bones. Before turning towards the next necessary task, you take a few extra moments just to breathe. You notice the slight shift in the scent profile of the room now that the meal is complete. The earthy smell of the oats mixes with the wood smoke from the hearth and the faint, sharp aroma of soap residue on your hands. These layered scents are the signature of your current life. This slow pace you have adopted, this deliberate gathering of strength, is not simply about calories. It is about calibration. It is about aligning yourself with the steady tempo of the community around you. You move slowly, deliberately, understanding that haste was a luxury afforded only to those who did not need to last until nightfall. As your gaze sweeps over the simple objects in the room, the worn basin, the stack of neatly bundled kindling, the heavy kneading board near the corner, you feel the quiet weight of daily routine settle upon you. These tools, these materials, they represent a reliable order in a world that often felt vast and unpredictable beyond the town walls. They are markers of sustained effort. You smooth your tunic, noticing the familiar scratchiness of the homespun wool against your skin. It is comfortable because it is utterly predictable. The texture whispers of endurance. You gather yourself, letting the slow warmth from your belly carry you forward, ready to transition fully into the structured pace of work that awaits. The work, when it finally begins, is not a sudden rush of energy, but rather a gradual summoning. You sit at the table or stand near your workbench, and the morning coolness that had settled into your bones seems to find an anchor in the steady rhythm of things. The air here carries the dry scent of sawdust mixed with old linseed oil, a permanent, comforting aroma that speaks of patience and persistence. Before you lies the material, perhaps lengths of wood waiting for joinery, or tightly wound skeins of wool needing mending, or piles of grain awaiting sorting. You pick up the first object, feeling its weight settle into your palm, a familiarity that connects you immediately to every hand that has held it before yours. You observe the dust. Fine, almost golden particulate matter coats your fingers and settles on the scarred wood surface. It is a constant reminder of the craft, of labor done patiently over generations. You might begin by simply running your fingertips along a length of salvaged oak, feeling the faint ridges left by previous tools. The gentle score marks that tell silent stories of use. These grooves are not flaws. They are histories written into the grain. Each indentation requires a mindful awareness of the material beneath your touch. Then comes the necessary preparation. Perhaps you must sharpen the edge of a small, trusted knife, or smooth the edges of a splintery piece of scrap. You take the stone and the blade, and the action itself becomes meditative. The whisper-quiet shush of steel against abrasive grit is one of the most profoundly soothing sounds you know. You work in slow arcs, applying steady pressure, observing how the metal changes, how it moves from dull to sharp, from hesitant resistance to confident glide. This process demands absolute focus. A moment of distraction and the effort falters. The geometry of your task unfolds before you. If you are weaving, you notice the precise, mathematical tension required in the warp threads, stretching them taut across the frame like waiting spirits. If you are working with grain, you consider the angles at which the light grazes the pile, highlighting variations in color and texture that require sorting by eye alone. These preliminary acts of arrangement establish a deep connection between human skill and natural materials. You lean closer to your work, breathing deeply to steady yourself against any lingering morning lethargy. The scent of the wood dust mingles with the faint medicinal smell of sweat and old soap used earlier in the day. You feel the shift from merely surviving to actively contributing. This physical commitment anchors you firmly in the time and place. Every movement, no matter how small, the repositioning of your elbow, the shifting weight on your heel, is considered part of a larger, economical ballet dictated by the task at hand. The quiet understanding settles over you. That life here is measured not by grand pronouncements, but by the consistent execution of necessary tasks. The passage of time feels less like a line and more like a slow pool, in which you are immersed moment by passing moment. There is an unexpected satisfaction found simply in competence, the knowledge that your hands know what to do, even if your mind is quiet. When your body begins to tire from the focused effort, it does not signal with sharp aches, but with a generalized slowing down, a deep pull toward restfulness. You pause, letting the weight of the tool settle in your lap for a moment. Your eyes track the dust motes dancing in the narrow shafts of light that pierce the building's structure, suspended and golden within the quiet air. It is here, amidst the organized clutter of tools and half-finished pieces, that you find a profound sense of rootedness. The accumulated history of all these objects, the broken bits, the worn handles, the stains of spilled dye or sap, speaks volumes about persistence. The craft you perform is rarely seen as magnificent by the outer world, yet it is the bedrock upon which your day and community rest. It requires a steady hand, yes, but more profoundly, it demands a steady mind capable of observation, of recognizing the subtle differences in color or texture that others might overlook. You begin to feel the slow accumulation of knowledge within you, skills passed down not through formal teaching, but through the sheer requirement of daily practice and sustained attention. The rhythm stabilizes. The initial awkward movements give way to familiar grace. Your breathing matches the steady scrape of your tool, or the methodical push of the shuttle across the loom. This repetitive flow becomes a kind of low meditation, a continuous humming against the silence. You are absorbed entirely into the minute detail of making things whole again, joining two pieces of wood that separated long ago, or drawing pattern from unruly strands of fiber. The focus pulls away from the distant needs of the day, and confines itself strictly to the patch of material before you. You notice how deeply tied your own well-being is to the state of this work. When you are engaged in it, time seems both slow and incredibly fast, slow in the meticulous measurement of every cut or stitch, yet quickened by the deepening pool of concentration. This focused effort becomes a protective bubble against the wider world's anxieties and fleeting drama. It simply asks for your attention, nothing more. The afternoon deepens this state of flow. The light shifts subtly, changing the hue of the dust on your fingers from bright gold to a deeper amber. You are deeply absorbed in the pattern before you, treating the raw material not as an object, but as potential, as something waiting for its true form to be revealed through disciplined effort and skilled touch. It is a quiet acknowledgement of human purpose, that even in these seemingly small tasks, there exists immense weight, connecting your labor directly to the sustenance and comfort of all those who live near you. When finally you take a break, the exhaustion is not dramatic, but deep, a satisfying ache in the muscles that tells you the day's necessary cycle has been honored. You exit the small, enclosed space of your home and step onto the packed earth path that leads toward the town center. The air here feels different than the scent trapped within your walls. It is a blend carried on a faint breeze, the sharp tang of livestock mingling with something sweet, perhaps wood smoke, and definitely the subtle sour note of fermenting grains. You adjust the weight of anything you carry, feeling the movement settle into an accustomed rhythm of slow motion. The path beneath your worn boots feels solid, deeply rutted by countless pairs of feet moving over generations. Looking up, the sky is vast and clear above the clustered rooftops, providing a bright canopy for this quiet beginning to the day's commerce. You move slowly now, allowing your senses to adjust to the low hum that defines the market approach. It is not the clamor of chaos, but rather a slow, overlapping accumulation of sounds. The measured creak of wooden wheels over uneven stones, the faint clinking of pottery against stone, and voices that speak in a rhythm lower than speech, a murmur of intent. Passing by the initial stalls, you begin to catalog the scents. Near one corner, a vendor is drying cured leather goods, and the smell rises off them like warm dust, rich, mineral, and vaguely smoky. Nearby, another man has stacked brightly dyed wool, and the scent of crushed plant dyes hangs in the folds, earthy and faintly sweet. You notice how these individual smells do not clash, but weave together into a single composite aroma that speaks entirely of human industry and survival. You walk past baskets piled high with root vegetables. The smell here is deep and cool, the unmistakable damp fragrance of turned soil meeting life underground. Peeling open a vision of sweet parsnips or sturdy turnips, you observe the dull color against your fingertips, thinking about the labor that brought them to this surface, the patience required in the earth's slow cycles. The spice merchant's corner draws you slightly off course. The aroma is sudden and sharp, an exotic burst that seems out of place amidst the local smells of sweat and grain. You pause, letting your eyes trace the small mounds of ground color, ochre turmeric, deep crimson paprika, and delicate saffron threads piled like captured sunsets. You breathe in deeply, recognizing the intensity of these distant lands. The journeys these spices must have undertaken merely to reach this simple market square. Observing the arrangement itself becomes a meditative act. The merchant keeps them covered when they are not being weighed, as if protecting not only their value but their delicate essence from the damp air. You notice how even in commerce, there is an aesthetic precision, a careful stacking of geometry against the randomness of life. Further along, you pass the baker's trestle table. The deep smell of recent baking grounds you to the moment. Loaves are stacked in perfect, if slightly uneven, pyramids, their crust a dark, rugged brown that speaks of intense heat and necessary sustenance. You observe the flour dusting the wooden surface beneath the loaves, fine and almost luminous in the morning light. This simple sight, bred for all hands, feels like the core rhythm upon which this entire town turns. You continue your slow movement through the main thoroughfare. Here, life moves with a studied inertia. People walk not to rush anywhere specific, but simply because their path takes them forward. You watch the way a woman balances a basket full of freshly laundered linens on her hip, the fabric slightly heavy and damp against her skirt. Her steps are practiced. She does not stumble or falter. It is in these repeated movements that you find a kind of steady truth about life here. The interaction with passers-by is brief, almost imperceptible. A quick nod to an acquaintance whose stall seems temporarily empty. The momentary exchange of glances with someone carrying a heavy yoke across their shoulders. These small acknowledgments build a tapestry of shared existence, a visible network of dependency and routine. You stop near the fishmonger's arrangement. Wet scales catch the morning light, flashing brief points of iridescent color, silver, copper, deep blue, against the darker wood boards. The air here is cooler, infused with the strong metallic scent of cold river water mixed with the clean smell of raw salt. You note the practiced way the fish are laid out and sorted, each scale pattern unique, a biological signature speaking of its life in the current. It is during these moments that your inner rhythm begins to adjust itself to the pace of the crowd. Your own thoughts slow down, matching the measured strolls around you. You realize that the market does not demand speed. It demands attention. It asks you simply to observe and absorb the details. The way a child's brightly colored sleeve whips out from behind an adult's cloak, or the deep groove worn into a cart wheel where decades of hauling have softened the oak. The energy in this place is transactional, but not aggressive. Goods are exchanged for goods, labor for sustenance. There is a profound economy to it, a careful understanding of need and value passed quietly between strangers who may live on the same street but know nothing of each other's lives. You find yourself contemplating the nature of necessity itself. Everything here seems necessary. The saffron to add color, the flower to provide lift, the steady footsteps to maintain the path. The sun has climbed higher now, warming the backs of your exposed hands. The heat is not overwhelming, but a constant presence that settles into the skin and begins to dry out any lingering dampness from the morning's ablutions. You feel a faint trace of wood dust mixed with the scent of ripe fruit, perhaps apples or pears offered by one vendor, that clings lightly to your clothes. You allow your gaze to sweep across the whole scene, taking in the vast collection of human endeavor. The baskets overflow with patterned textiles, rough sacks spill over with grains that promise future meals, and every stall seems an encapsulation of a necessary skill. Dyeing, weaving, curing, baking. It is not simply about acquiring things. It is about recognizing the systems of production that make your life possible. You are participating in this flow merely by walking through it, becoming a momentary element in this sprawling, intricate machine of commerce and community. The market's rumbling is therefore less a soundscape and more a vibration, a low, constant hum of people existing together, working toward the quiet continuity of daily survival. The passage moves slowly from one area to the next, allowing your mind time to settle into the sheer density of human life organized with invisible boundaries. You notice that while everything here is tangible, the grain, the wood, the spice, there is also an intangible sense of history passing through the air, carried on the breath of those who have stood exactly where you now stand centuries before. You finally drift away from the densest core of trade, turning onto a quieter side street. The noise level drops instantly, replaced by the gentle patter of feet moving along stone that has seen fewer carts pass. This sudden quiet allows your senses to gather themselves again, leaving only the faintest echoes of the market's energy behind you, a residual warmth in the air, and the lingering scent of distant spices and baking bread. The steady warmth of the midday sun, filtered through dusty panes and narrow alleyways, settles over you. It does not press down heavily, but rather washes over you in gentle, uneven patches, the bright heat against the cool stone floor underfoot. You find yourself near a corner where the passage narrows slightly, an area that seems perpetually caught between the homes and the public thoroughfare. Here, time moves with a less predictable rhythm than within the measured pace of your own daily routines. Your focus is simply on observation, becoming a quiet observer of accumulated moments. You settle slowly onto the worn stone bench, or perhaps stand leaning against the cool grit of an archway that has witnessed countless footsteps. You let your awareness expand outward, allowing the edges of the small moment to soften around you. The air here carries a blend of smells, the lingering sharpness of cut wood mixing with the sweet, earthy musk rising from overflowing market bins, overlaid sometimes by the faint, metallic tang of water drawn recently. These scents are the quiet signature of life passing through this place. Your gaze drifts over the movement around you. It is not a flurry of excitement or urgent purpose. Rather, it is the steady, unremarkable current of people going about their known tasks. Notice the way a child's linen tunic catches the light, maybe stained with some forgotten berry juice. A flash of unexpected color against the muted palette of rough-spun wool and faded dyes that dominate the passing crowd. You watch this small piece of vivid detail, letting it anchor your attention gently. Ahead, a cart slowly rolls by. It creaks, making a deep, resonating groan that seems to come from the very bones of the wood itself. You observe the mechanism, the way the wheel rests on an axle, and how the weight transfers with painstaking slowness, demanding continuous effort. This gentle grinding sound is simply part of the architecture of the moment, a physical reminder of labor performed in steps. You look closer at the cart's wheel. The wood grain near the hub seems worn deep, smoothed by generations of passage, a polished where that speaks not just of use, but of routine. You consider how much energy goes into this simple act of moving goods from one point to another, and how necessary that constant movement is for the life of the town. Near a stall piled high with crates of vegetables, an elderly woman sits, shelling beans or perhaps mending a large sack. Her movements are economical. There is no wasted motion in her hands, only precise repetition honed by years of practice. You notice the rhythmic clink-thump sound as she works, a quiet metronome marking the passing hours. This repetitive task seems almost meditative, drawing all focus into the small spaces between her fingers and the kernels. As midday progresses, the light shifts subtly overhead, changing from the sharp glare of morning to a more pervasive, diffuse glow. It illuminates dust motes dancing slowly in the shafts of sunlight that penetrate the narrow passages. These invisible particles hang suspended for moments, visible only when the light catches them just right, making the air itself seem palpable and golden. You find yourself watching an artisan, perhaps a metalsmith or leatherworker, who takes respite from their main task simply to sit and observe the passage of time in this square. Their posture is relaxed, yet attentive. They are studying the interplay of shadows cast by the eaves onto the uneven cobblestones. Each shadow falls with distinct boundaries, giving definition to the irregularities of the ground beneath it. The stones under your own feet feel cool and sturdy, possessing a reliable coolness that counteracts the warmth rising from the gathered crowd. You press your heel lightly against the stone, feeling its solid resistance. This tactile connection grounds you deeper in the moment, connecting you physically to the unmoving backdrop of the town. You contemplate the inherent rhythm of this community life, the slow beginning with ablutions and simple meals, the measured effort of labor that occupies the core hours, and now, this long, quiet pause in the central thoroughfare. Everything operates on a current of habit, a predictable ebb and flow that requires little conscious thought to sustain. The noise does not consist of sudden outbursts, but rather an interwoven texture, the low murmur of conversations conducted in hushed tones, the occasional, brief call from a vendor whose voice is instantly absorbed by the surrounding sounds, the distant, rhythmic splash of water, perhaps a pump operating or water being carried overhead. These disparate sounds weave together into a single, continuous sonic blanket. Your observation drifts towards the architecture itself. You notice how human habitation dictates form. Doorways too small for easy passage, alleyways that curve unexpectedly, and roofs built close together against the elements. The buildings lean on each other, sharing the weight of centuries and the moisture of seasons, creating a cohesive, organic pattern. You take a slower breath now, noticing the slight difference in the texture of the cloth passing your arm, a rough, scratchy weave next to a soft, freshly dyed piece of linen. These details accumulate, forming a vast, intricate tapestry of lived experience that surrounds you completely. There is nothing demanding attention, only a steady sequence of moments unfolding one after another. This slow accumulation of detail encourages a kind of quiet surrender. You are not performing any task. You are simply receiving the flow of existence around you. The physical need to move or plan gives way to the pure pleasure of being present in this contained space, absorbing the gentle energy of countless lives lived along this very spot for unknown stretches of time. It is a deep lesson in patience, observed simply by existing within the steady rhythm of other people's necessary routines. You let yourself become part of that quiet observation, anchored entirely to the warmth of the midday light and the enduring permanence of the stone around you. You find yourself settled back into the quiet rhythm of learned hands. The light that filters in from the window is lower now than it was during the full, bright arc of the market. It possesses a muted quality, settling softly on the wooden surface where you are working. You might be sitting at an elbow table, or perhaps near the communal weaving loom, depending on what skill the day has presented itself to teach you. The materials before you feel familiar, yet somehow new. They require both practiced ease and concentrated patience. Your focus settles upon a repetitive task. Perhaps it is the painstaking process of knotting thick, plied wool into an even, measured sequence, or maybe reviewing accounts written on thin sheets of vellum, following the precise columns of ink left by someone else. If you are learning weaving, your fingers find the rhythm of throw and take. The slight whir of the shuttle returning to its rest point becomes a background hum against the gentle scrape of the reed. Each movement is an economy of energy, each action having been perfected over repetition until it required little conscious thought. The wood on the work surface has absorbed decades of various crafts, the faint residue of bone polish, the mineral chalk dust from earlier calculations, and perhaps the sweet, sharp tang of cured leather scraps. You notice how these scents mingle faintly in the stillness. They are the ghost smells of many hands that labored in this very spot before you. When your concentration deepens, time loses its easy, linear quality. It expands into a slow pool, allowing you to observe details usually overlooked. Consider the grain of the wood beneath your fingertips. It is not uniform, but but a pattern of slight swells and depressions, each mark telling a silent story of the tree's long life before it was shaped for this work. Or perhaps you look at the thread in your hands. It is spun from roots or sheep fleece, dyed with minerals that yield colors both faded and rich. You trace the imperfections, where the color might bleed slightly unevenly, indicating the variable quality of the natural dye bath. The knowledge being transferred today, whether it is an accounting principle, or the precise way to repair a hinge, feels weighted by tradition. It does not arrive in a flash of inspiration, but through slow accumulation, like water filling a basin drop by measured drop. You realize that mastering this specific skill means more than just completing a task. It means accepting a segment of your life's continuity with those who came before you. There is a quiet, satisfying weight when the complex suddenly yields to understanding. Perhaps the knots initially seemed random, like wild tanglements resisting human neatness. But as you perform the sequence for the 5th time, then the 10th, the logic reveals itself. A pattern clicks into place, a simple geometric necessity that has been understood and passed down through silent demonstration and careful instruction. Sometimes, your mind wanders from the immediate mechanical requirement of the task. You might suddenly recall a memory, not with sharp clarity, but with a generalized emotional warmth, the scent of hay in a summer field, or the cool dampness near the riverbank during the morning's ablutions. These memories do not disrupt the work. Rather, they act as quiet anchors, connecting your practiced hands to a larger landscape of lived experience. The physical effort is minimal, but it demands a continuous presence. You feel the subtle shifting in your posture, the slight fatigue beginning to pool in the tendons of your wrist and forearm. These small signals are not signs of weakness, but rather indicators that your body has achieved a comfortable rhythm with this specialized action. It is a deep kind of physical meditation. When you pause, perhaps momentarily to sharpen the point of a stylus or simply to rest your vision, you take a few slow breaths. You notice the shift in temperature. The air, while no longer cold as dawn, has settled into an afternoon warmth that presses against your skin. A faint whiff of wood smoke drifts from a neighboring chimney, mingling with the persistent, low smell of wet earth and dust that clings to the cobbled path just beyond the threshold. Looking across the way, you observe other people engaged in their own quiet routines. The baker, perhaps, is sweeping up stray flour near his doorway, making slow, methodical passes over the dusty ground. A child might be dragging a weighted wheelbarrow, moving with an unburdened rhythm that contrasts sharply with the focused gravity of your current endeavor. None of these actions draw notice. They simply are, forming the continuous, textured tapestry of community life. You absorb the quiet wisdom in their steady motions. Their labor speaks of necessity and permanence. The market's noise has softened into a manageable murmur, the low voices discussing prices, the rhythmic creak of a leather harness, the soft thump as sacks are placed upon ground. These sounds do not suggest frantic urgency. They speak of life maintaining its deep, slow breath. The afternoon light, which began to hint at golden hues earlier, settles into a softer amber, bathing the materials you work with in a gentle, indirect glow. This quality of light seems designed for contemplation and delicate craft. It is forgiving, highlighting texture without harsh glare. It reminds you that skill is not just about strength or speed, but often about seeing things clearly under diffused illumination. As you continue your patterned motions, the external world recedes further. There remains only the immediate challenge of the material in front of you and the quiet dialogue between your trained hands and the tool in your grasp. You understand that this mastery, This refined ability to execute a task correctly and repeatedly is a cornerstone of existence here. It is what structures the community, ensuring that the baskets are woven tightly enough to carry harvest, or that the records are kept accurate enough so no one goes without due sustenance. The mental effort required for deep skill is surprisingly soothing. When your mind is fully occupied by a sequence of steps, a measurement, a stitch, a calculation, it rarely has room for worry about things outside the current moment. You simply exist within the necessity of the craft. This focused routine becomes a meditation of sustained attention, rooting you firmly in the present geometry of time and material. The day's steady rhythm, marked by the brisk start and the focused labor of the market, begins to gently lose its sharp edges. You feel it first in the light, a subtle transformation that does not arrive with any sudden fanfare, but rather, like a deepening stain across the western sky. The sunlight, which had been clear and purposeful at midday, seems to soften now, losing its harsh, vertical insistence. It is as though the air itself has grown thick with suspended golden dust. You find yourself naturally drawn toward an open space, perhaps the edge of your dwelling or a quiet corner near the communal well. Here, the gathered sounds of the day begin their slow process of deceleration. The sharp cries of the vendors are quieter. They are gathering their wares and speaking in lowered tones, the business shifting from transaction to polite winding-down chatter. You notice how this change affects the movement of people, too. The pace of life slows down to a thoughtful deliberation. Where you walked with focused intention earlier, now your steps feel almost guided by gravity, heavy with the accumulated weight of the day's activity. The dust from the market floor, the subtle ache in your forearms from handling wood, the slight dryness that settles behind the eyes. Above you, the sky performs its daily masterpiece. The blue is not retreating so much as deepening into shades of lilac and pearl, mixing gradually with smears of ochre and gentle apricot. You observe how these colors do not simply cover the clouds, but seem to bleed into each other at great lengths, staining the high atmosphere in a manner that feels both vast and deeply comforting. You stand quietly, letting the warmth on your skin seep into your bones. The golden light now rakes across the packed earth where you stand, exaggerating every small irregularity of the soil. A scattered pebble, a thin scratch mark left by a cartwheel, a clump of dried weeds. These shadows are long and theatrical, pulling straight lines from objects to places that feel suddenly distant or intimately close. The air begins to carry new scents now, different from the morning's sharp bite of resin or the midday's tang of spices. It is the smell of cooling wood smoke, a sweet, nutty scent mixed with the earthy dampness of the ground absorbing the day's heat. Someone nearby is slowly stacking kindling, and you notice how neatly they are arranged, by size, by type, anticipating the necessary warmth to come. It takes effort, though quiet observation sometimes requires more energy than actual work does. You watch a woman emptying water from a large wooden basin. The sound of the sluice mechanism turning is soft, measured, and almost musical in its predictability. The resulting trickle into the larger channel sounds like murmuring whispers, a gentle wash that carries away the residue of effort. You consider the nature of this winding down. Every action today, the purchase of bread, the sharpening of an edge, the rinsing of hands, was focused on maintaining order, keeping life running smoothly through the long hours. Now, as the light softens, the accumulated fatigue settles in, not as a desperate need for sleep, but as a gentle physical awareness, a knowing that the hardest part of the cycle has passed. The domestic rituals become noticeable in detail. A man is methodically sweeping straw into a corner, collecting stray pieces of grit and debris. The rhythmic scrape swish, repeated over the same patch of floor, establishes a steady beat against the backdrop of cooling colors. You note how every such small act contributes to the overall sense of calm restoration. The feeling is one of graceful diminishment. The energy that powered the morning's labor does not vanish. It simply retreats into the necessary structures of the home, into the banked coals, the sturdy wooden frames, and the cool permanence of the earth beneath your feet. You breathe in deeply, pulling the mix of wood smoke and cooling soil into your lungs. It is a scent that speaks only of completion. You observe how the colors intensify just before the shift to twilight. Hues of deep rose mingle with faint amethyst along the eastern rim of visible clouds, even if they are now moving westward. These are the transitional shades, the palette of pause, making you feel suspended between the full vitality of the day and the necessary hush of the night. The gathering of these evening colors feels like a collective sigh. The energy that was spent calling out prices or measuring dry goods is now being gently gathered back, folded into silence. It reminds you that even the most bustling community must eventually find its quiet center for renewal, drawing upon the small stores of light and warmth accumulated through shared days. Eventually, your movements grow slower still. You feel the day's remaining purpose pulling you toward a place of rest, not sleep itself, but the simple act of preparation for it. The air cools just slightly around your ankles as dusk approaches fully. The lingering heat of the sun is replaced by the cooler, deeper breath of approaching night, making the moments spent observing these beautiful vanishing colors all the more precious. The air inside the small room shifts as you finish your labors, carrying the lingering scent of wood smoke and cooling ash. The main meal is set upon a sturdy wooden table, warmed by the day's persistent heat. Everything feels heavier now, settled into the reliable rhythm of shared sustenance. You gather yourself, moving with an unhurried grace that speaks of deep fatigue mixed with quiet contentment. Pulling out your own chair, you settle down slowly, noting the smooth patina of the worn wood beneath your hands and the familiar ache in your shoulders from the day's tasks. You watch as others begin to take their places, gathering around the table like figures gathered by a natural current. The sounds are not sudden bursts, but rather a constant, low hum, the overlapping whispers, the soft scrape of pewter on wood, the occasional quiet thud of earthenware being set down. This soundscape is the true music of the close day, suggesting lives lived in close proximity. The food presented for this meal is different from the quick fuel of breakfast. It speaks of richness achieved through careful planning, perhaps roasted root vegetables, or thick loaves of bread accompanying a stew scented with herbs and slow-cooked meats. You approach your bowl, the steam rising up briefly to momentarily soften the edges of the room's light. The scent fills you, a blend of earthiness from the roots, the deep savor of the simmering broth, and the sharp, clean aroma of dried oregano. You take a small portion onto your wooden trencher plate. Everything moves slowly at this hour. No one is rushing to conclude the meal. Instead, the pace encourages lingering, allowing the simple act of eating to become an anchor for the shared moment. You lift the bread, feeling its weight and noting the slight grit on the crust. It is a comforting, substantial texture in your hands. As you begin to eat, the conversations around you drift up to meet you, weaving together like threads being drawn across a loom. They are not dramatic exchanges. They are repetitions, recalling the day's small details, noting the price of grain at the market, remembering who was ill, or discussing the best time to plant next spring. You absorb these narratives without actively participating in every thread, letting them wash over you like the gentle tide. It is a profound kind of education, this sharing of stories over food. The collective memory of the group is sustained by these low murmurs, passed from one ear to the next. You find yourself listening particularly closely to the rhythm of voices, the deeper baritone, the quicker pitch, the measured tone that implies age and wisdom. The warmth of the meal does more than just satisfy hunger. It spreads a deep, internal heat that seems to smooth out the day's edges. Your gaze drifts over the faces surrounding you. Each face holds the accumulated map of years. The faint lines around the eyes from squinting into bright sun, the steady set of the jaw from worry or determination, the softness on cheeks from good living. You remember the small details of the afternoon, perhaps assisting your neighbor with a tough patch of thread, feeling the rough drag of the yarn through your fingers. Now, that physical focus is replaced by the gentle intellectual labor of listening. You realize how much sustenance comes not only from food, but from being acknowledged, from having your existence woven into the tapestry of others' concerns and histories. The stories told touch upon cycles, the predictable return of the season's rain, the necessary ebb and flow of human fortune, the steady turning of the sun. They are narratives that root you firmly in place, reminding you that while individual lives feel ephemeral, the rhythm of community life is vast and dependable. There is a noticeable quietude beneath the chatter. It is not the silence of absence, but the deep quiet of contentment. It is the sound of people who know their places within a system larger than themselves, the field needing sowing, the roof needing mending, the stories needing telling to keep the memory alive. After your bowl is empty and the remnants are scraped into a wooden pail, you do not rush away from the table. The ritual dictates a period of settling. You lean back in your chair, feeling the last vestiges of heat radiating from the hearth nearby. The aromas, the sharp wood smoke, the lingering savory herbs, the faint sweetness of cooling bread, mix together to create the unique scent signature of the close day. When the others begin to slowly dismantle their immediate surroundings, clearing plates and gathering baskets, you feel the natural pull towards a slowing down. Every action becomes measured. Stacking ceramic bowls, wiping wooden surfaces on damp cloth, the gentle scrape of shoes across packed earth as people move away from the meal's focus. You observe how the light has diminished again since midday. It is now a richer, more amber quality, filtered through the deepening dusk and catching the dust motes suspended in the air. These golden beams illuminating the settled dust feel like a benediction on the day's completed work. The residual feeling of togetherness lingers in the space where you were seated. It suggests connection, not dependency. The shared knowledge that even when separated by our sleeping sides at night, we are tied together by these meals, these routines, and the stories whispered into the darkening air. The sense of self expands slightly, accepting its necessary place within this established pattern of life. You feel the comfortable gravity of routine pulling you gently toward the next phase. The quiet winding down toward rest, carrying with you the warmth of shared breath and low voices that define the passing hours. The evening light, having been the rich gold of midday and the deep ochre of late afternoon, now settles into a muted wash of plum and slate. You find yourself moving through the last domestic routines, limbs carrying the comfortable exhaustion of a day fully lived. The air retains the lingering warmth from the hearth fires, mixed with the cooler scent of cooling earth that seeps in from the packed dirt courtyard. Your movements are slow, unhurried, guided by the deeply etched memory of how things must be done. You gather the day's excess. Perhaps you collect the empty wooden pails used for water drawn from the well earlier, or you sweep up fallen straw grit that has migrated across the earthen floor. Each sweep is a deliberate action. The rhythmic drag of the broom bristles against the packed earth makes a dry, whispery sound. a gentle counterpoint to the occasional clatter coming from deeper within the house. You notice the faint streaks of dust on your knuckles, remnants of the wood grain or the fine grit carried in from the market hours. It is not a hurried clean-up. It is an essential settling. This process of tidying the material world helps to empty the mind for rest. You observe how the last rays of light struggle through the small casement window, illuminating dust motes that dance lazily in the beams, tiny visible reminders of all the life and effort contained within these walls today. You remember the careful stacking of dry kindling near the cooking hearth, making sure every piece is placed to maximize efficiency when night draws its curtain. Near the back door, you pause to look toward the small enclosure where the livestock rest for the night. The scent here is different, a musky blend of warm animal coats, damp bedding straw, and manure that has been allowed to decompose slowly underfoot. You check the water trough, ensuring it still holds enough liquid to last through the night chill. The deep wooden tub feels heavy beneath your fingers, grounding you in the reality of sustaining life, human and beast alike. You carry a low basin of fresh water back toward the washing area. This is not just for washing, it is a symbolic preparation. You cup your hands, feeling the smooth coolness of the water against your skin, noting how quickly its surface tension resists the air. The act of filling this basin and arranging it nearby anchors you in the physical necessities of survival, a rhythm far older than memory. You move back toward your sleeping quarters. The deep wood frame of the cot feels familiar beneath your touch, worn smooth by countless nights of rest. Before retiring yourself completely, there is a final inventory, checking the window latch to ensure it holds against any sudden draft, perhaps rearranging some woven matting so that every corner is accounted for. These small checks are acts of gentle control in an otherwise unpredictable world. The transition from the bustle of shared stories at dinner to this quiet pre-sleep ritual feels vast, a drop into deep calm. You notice the shift in sound. The low hum of conversation fades entirely, replaced by the persistent sounds of settling. The occasional creak of cooling wood beams expanding and contracting with temperature change. The gentle tink of ceramic pots being placed on stone shelves. You take a slow breath, drawing the cool evening air deep into your chest. It smells faintly of smoke from the extinguished embers in the main hearth, mingling now with the sweeter scent of drying herbs hung overhead, rosemary perhaps, or wild lavender, remnants from the previous season's growth. These scents are subtle, grounding anchors that tie you to this specific place and moment. As your focus settles on the simple geometry of rest, the mattress, the blanket folded neatly upon it, the cool stone floor just inches away, a deeper layer of reflection surfaces. You think about the weight of time itself. It is not a rapid river pulling you forward. Rather, it is more like this slow, steady tide that rises and falls with the turning of the stars above. Today's labor and today's rest are simply parts of one sustained breath. The meticulous nature of these evening preparations, the gathering of garments for the following day, ensuring the small cooking fire is banked properly, checking on the structural soundness of the shelter itself, is a quiet acknowledgement of continuity. You are not merely preparing to sleep. You are participating in an ancient cycle. This routine reassures you that even when the mind's rest and the body's slow, the rhythm of life persists through these methodical actions. You shed your outer garments, smoothing them out carefully upon a small wooden chair. They feel heavier now than they did at dawn, weighed down by the humidity of the day's activity. The simple wool or linen fibers hold the warmth of the previous hours, and you observe the slight fading in color where years of use have worn away the dye. The last task involves arranging your sleeping space itself. You draw up the straw matting, checking beneath it for stray bits of grit or discarded wood slivers. The texture under your fingers is a mixture of dry, papery rustle and resilient firmness. This act of smoothing the immediate ground upon which you will lie feels deeply necessary, an attempt to impose order on the space that has seen so much activity. You settle into the prepared corner, lying down briefly just to feel the coolness and flatness of the surface beneath your back. The muscles in your shoulders release their tension with a soft, audible sigh. There is nothing dramatic to anticipate now, only the steady descent into quietude. You close your eyes not because you are tired, but because the elaborate choreography of waking, working, and surviving has culminated in this perfect moment of stillness. The last sounds that reach your awareness are the faint whispers of the wind moving through a nearby chimney flue, sounding like distant, unintelligible breathing. The gentle sound marking the passing away into night. You find yourself in a deep settling of the evening, a time marked not by sudden change, but by a gradual yielding to darkness. The main labors of the day are done, and the house breathes out slowly, shedding the focused energy of communal effort. You have completed your winding down rituals, tidying the last traces of the day's activity. Perhaps you swept the fine wood dust into a corner or adjusted the kindling pile near the hearth until it looked just so. A quiet peace has settled around you, a stillness that feels almost tangible, like a cooled piece of heavy cloth. You move slowly now, letting your feet register the slight coolness of the packed earth or worn flagstones under your worn soles. Every step is measured, economical, as if carrying the weight of deep fatigue and quiet contemplation. The air itself seems to have changed since midday. It is no longer simply cool, but weighted with the distinct scent of wood smoke mixed with cooling clay, and the faint, sweet musk of damp earth that never quite leaves this corner of the world. You might notice how the shadows are starting their slow reclamation, stretching long and distorted across the rough-hewn beams overhead, pulling every detail into a gentle obscurity. These lengthening shadows seem to draw together all the small corners of life lived here, pulling them toward one soft pocket of diminishing light. The scent changes as well. The sharp bite of the afternoon smoke softens, mingling with the deeper, richer smell emanating from the hearth. The smell of embers cooling, of old ash mixed with wood sap and stored resin. You settle yourself into a spot near where the remaining firelight has gathered, drawn to the residual warmth, sitting close enough to feel the gentle, radiant heat sinking into your bones, but far enough not to disturb the fragile, dwindling glow. The light that remains is thin and precious, emanating from some carefully banked embers or perhaps a simple oil lamp set upon a rough wooden ledge. It is not the bright energy of noon sun. Rather, it is a subdued, amber luminescence that has the quality of memory itself, softening edges, deepening colors into hues of ochre and deep plum. You let your gaze wander slowly across the room, drinking in this weak, flickering light. The lamplight catches the dust motes suspended in the air, making them visible, tiny galaxies adrift in the quiet space. Each particle seems to hold the memory of movement, the hurried passing footsteps earlier, or the slight flutter of a discarded piece of fabric. It is remarkable how everything, even the insignificant dust, finds a way to participate in the slow ceremony of ending day. You notice the texture of your own garments, perhaps brushing against the rough weave of wool that has absorbed the smells and minor grit of the recent hours. This clothing, familiar yet slightly soiled, speaks volumes about continuity. It has witnessed another cycle of rest and labor just like this one. Your mind begins to slow its pace with the dimming light. The constant stream of small concerns, the weight of tomorrow's chores, the needs of others, the minor frustrations of a poorly finished task, begins to settle, becoming less urgent, dissolving into the quiet resonance of the dwelling. You feel the pleasant heaviness in your limbs, not the sharp ache of exhaustion, but a deep, restorative pull towards stillness. Your breath deepens slightly, matching the slow, steady pulse of the hearth or the soft crackle of embers dying out. This moment is purely observational. There are no tasks remaining to be done, only processes. The slowing down of time, the cool creep of night air, and the gentle acceptance of fatigue. You might recall a small pleasure from the day, the perfect flavor of the bread during the meal, or the way the sun had slanted just so across the market stone floor earlier, and allow that memory to occupy your attention fully. It is not an attempt at joy, but merely an act of careful collection, like gathering smooth stones by a river bank. You observe the hands resting in your lap. They are stained faintly from today's tasks, marked by calluses and minor nicks. They are tools, instruments of survival and sustenance, deeply familiar to you through years of repetition. Looking at them brings with it a silent acknowledgement of time past, the sheer accumulation of necessary effort that constitutes a life lived fully within the rhythm of seasons and routine. The lamplight casts deep, warm circles on the nearby wall, highlighting small imperfections in the plaster or stone. A chipped edge here, a darker stain there. These marks are not faults. They are chronicles written by time itself, documenting the passing hands that have sheltered beneath this roof before you, and continuing to shelter after you. You allow your gaze to settle just on these textures, the roughness of the wood grain against the smooth curve of an earthenware pot, the matte finish of worn stone contrasting with the soft flicker of lamplight. This close observation pulls your attention away from abstract worries and grounds it firmly in the immediate physical reality. There is a profound comfort in this groundedness, in acknowledging that the world requires only these basic elements to exist for another night: wood, fire, shelter, and time. Your mind begins to sift through thoughts not with effort, but with surrender, like grains of sand settling in an hourglass. You consider the pattern of your life, the cycle of waking before dawn, the rigorous ablutions, the necessary labor, the communal meal, and finally this quiet, slow descent toward sleep. This patterned rhythm is both a boundary and a comfort. It defines who you are, what your day means, and what rest must feel like. You become aware of the small sounds accompanying the waning light, the faintest tink as a piece of glass cools on a ledge, the almost imperceptible creak from the settling timbers of the house, or perhaps just the soft hush of your own steady breathing. Each sound is absorbed into the overall texture of quietude. This lull before true sleep feels like a deep inhale, drawing in all the necessary calm to survive until morning light returns and begins the cycle anew. The lamplight continues its patient vigil, casting out slow pools of warm visibility while allowing the outer darkness to gather steadily, promising rest and necessary oblivion for a time. You let your consciousness become as soft and pliable as the fading glow before you, accepting nothing but the deepening peace. The last flickers of orange light peel away from the eaves, giving way to a deepening wash of indigo. You feel the subtle change in the air, a gradual coolness seeping into the corners of the dwelling that had been held at bay by the day's simple warmth. The scents of wood smoke and cooling ash mingle with the earthy dampness rising up through the packed dirt floor, a scent unique to the close confines of human habitation after a long day's labor. You observe this change not just visually, but deeply in your chest, a slowing rhythm that mimics the quietening outside. The sounds of the market are gone, replaced by something far more delicate and pervasive: silence. It is not an empty void, but a weighted blanket of soundlessness, punctuated only by nearby life. Perhaps it is the faint scraping whisper of straw against rough stone in the adjoining room, or the soft, sighing rush of wind through an unlatched window pane. You settle deeper into your current moment of quiet reflection. Your limbs feel heavy now, anchored by the cumulative weight of routine and exertion. The skin on your hands still carries the faint scent of wood dust from the morning's sharpening, a ghost memory that speaks to hours spent in methodical repetition. You notice how this residual smell settles into the folds of your rough-spun tunic, a subtle testament to the day's necessary effort. The fading light turns the shadows long and indistinct across the walls. These are not the sharp, defined lines of midday sunlight. They are soft, yielding smudges of deeper color, making the familiar objects, the hearth, the kneading board, the woven basket, seem softened by time itself. You tilt your head slightly, listening intently to differentiate these night sounds from mere imagination. Every quiet sound requires a small act of focused attention. Occasionally, from somewhere beyond the immediate cluster of homes, you hear a distinct, organic call. It is low in pitch and carries poorly, muffled by distance and the growing cool air. Perhaps it is a dog barking once, a sound that seems to crest and then fall away into nothingness. Or perhaps it is the faint, rhythmic clink of water being drawn from a trough at another corner of the village, an echo of activity already consigned to the past. You track these sounds, letting them wash over you without needing to name or judge them. They serve only to measure the boundaries of your immediate peace. The air cools further, carrying with it the cool whisper of nocturnal breezes that wander through the narrow streets, brushing against the eaves and passing down the length of the roof beams. You feel this breath of night settle on your skin, different from the daytime warmth, possessing a clean, almost mineral coolness. Inside, the final domestic activities are concluding. The deep, thrumming energy that characterized the mid-afternoon has dissipated entirely. Only the slow process of cooling remains, the hearth embers settling into a dull orange patience, the water in the wash basin losing its day's coolness and gravity. Everything slows to match the rhythm of repose. You shift slightly, testing the texture of your mattress beneath you, feeling the subtle give of straw under the woolen covering. It is rough against your skin, but it holds a familiar shape. You take a slow, deep breath, drawing in the composite scent of the dwelling at rest. Dried herbs from last season's bundling mixed with wood smoke residue, and the underlying, pervasive smell of cool stone and undisturbed earth. The quiet becomes a presence itself, something to be navigated gently. It demands that you pay close attention to the minute details. The tiny creak when your weight shifts on the wooden beam, the slight shift in the temperature gradient from the wall to your body, the way the shadows seem to thicken and draw near at the periphery of sight. There is a profound rhythm to this period of transition. It reminds you that even the most structured life, one dictated by rising with dawn and working until dusk, must eventually submit to the vast, quiet machinery of night. This surrender is not an ending, but a necessary suspension. You find yourself dwelling on the simple act of remaining still. Your breath becomes measured, a slow inhale, a slightly longer, calming exhale. You feel the gentle weight of your own body settling into the bedding, sinking minimally into the fibers and straw that cradle you. Every muscle group finds its natural rest point. The effort to maintain awareness starts to ebb away like a tide retreating from the shore. The outside world continues its silent unfolding. You might notice the occasional rustle, a small creature moving through overgrown weeds just beyond the visible threshold, or perhaps just an errant corner of cloth catching on rough stone. These tiny disturbances prove that life is merely taking a different form, one less audible and more textural. You watch the remaining patches of light struggle against the encroaching dark, noting how quickly any lingering artificial glow, a stray oil lamp flame, for instance, is overwhelmed by the vast canvas of night sky filtering through the gaps in the house walls. This natural darkening is not an absence. It is a powerful kind of fullness. The sense of enclosure grows comforting. The thick walls and low ceiling wrap around you, creating a protective bubble against the wilder, unseen elements outside. It is here, in this small pocket of shared human warmth, that the day's scattered remnants of effort begin to consolidate into simple memory. The satisfying ache in your back from yesterday's lifting, the specific crisp taste of morning bread, the quiet companionship of routine. The quiet whispers a kind of steady reassurance. It speaks not of adventure or climax, but of endurance, of continuity. You realize that this state of settled silence is itself a rhythm, as predictable and necessary as the sunrise you anticipate when sleep releases you. You let your consciousness soften, following the calming pull of the descending night, feeling yourself gently drifting toward the deep pool of undisturbed rest. The day's memory rests around you, a low, soft haze of scents and sounds that have seeped into the very grain of the wood. You feel the residual warmth deep in your bones, a slow heat left over from the hearth fires and the shared meal. After all the measured movements, the sweep of the broom across the rough earth floor, the careful stacking of kindling, the low hum of conversation that punctuated hours, there is now only this profound hush. You are back at the bed, the center point of your small corner of the world. The deep darkness has crept in, thick and cool, pulling the corners of the room into shades of indigo. It smells faintly of damp straw and spent wood smoke, a unique scent that belongs only to sleeping quarters. You approach the low pallet, moving with the kind of slow, deliberate caution that comes from great weariness. The mattress beneath you is hard yet yielding, covered by thick woolen blankets that carry the subtle aroma of lanolin and smoke. You notice the weight of your own limbs, the satisfying ache in the muscles, a deep fatigue earned by hands that have worked steadily since dawn. Settling onto the edge of the bed, you take a moment merely to breathe, allowing the slower rhythm of your breath to synchronize with the profound quietude surrounding you. The air is cooler now than it was hours ago when the fire provided its temporary counterheat. This cool air touches your exposed skin and settles on the creases in the woven blanket. You pull the heavy covering up around your shoulders, drawing it tight against the chill, a comforting pressure that feels like being wrapped by the very structure of the house itself. Beneath the weight of the wool, you can feel the contours of the bedding material, the familiar weave pattern which speaks of countless similar nights. It is the texture of safety. Across the small shared space lies another form, settled into their own necessary darkness. You turn your head slightly, careful not to disturb the peace established between the two sleepers. The gap between you is a measured distance, a careful negotiation of personal space within a confined domestic shell. This gap seems particularly important tonight. It is more than just physical breathing room. It holds unspoken boundaries and histories, a shared warmth that is nonetheless maintained by separate territories. You observe how the darkness seems to gather in the corner furthest from any light source, an impenetrable curtain of night. You lie down slowly now, carefully arranging yourself on your side so as not to jar the sleeper next to you, maintaining the physical and emotional buffer zone established between your resting forms. The surface beneath you accepts your weight with a soft sigh of settling straw. You reach out, just slightly, cupping your hand around the cool ceramic jug that holds water for the morning, a simple reminder of the cycle's inevitable start. This act anchors you to the rhythm of life that continues even when consciousness is retreating. As you close your eyes, letting the edges of the room fade from sight, Your focus narrows entirely onto the sensation of the blanket against your skin. You feel the slight shifting of air currents. If a breeze stirs through the eaves, it whispers against the rough-hewn timbers of the house, sounding like hushed, unintelligible secrets. Sometimes, you can hear the occasional distant clanging, perhaps an animal bell or tools being settled away in another yard. These sporadic sounds are not interruptions, but rather punctuation marks in the continuous narrative of night. You consider the arrangement of the bed itself, how two lives fit into one narrow space, each maintaining its careful perimeter even when both bodies share the same blanket and the same roof. This physical geometry mirrors a quieter, more complex negotiation within the human spirit, the proximity that offers comfort, yet requires the respectful maintenance of distance to allow for individual rest and separate dreams. It is a quiet testament to shared necessity. The scent in the room deepens as the surrounding wood cools further. You catch the subtle, comforting tang of cedar mingled with old wool. These smells are not exotic. They are utterly ordinary, woven into the fabric of this specific dwelling, attached to the memory of its inhabitants and years of sustained routine. Each inhale is a slow cataloging of presence. You let your mind drift back through the hours past. You recall the grit on the bread at breakfast, the rhythmic rasp of the whetstone against steel in the afternoon, the way the midday sun had struck the dust motes in the air, making them visible as if they were small, dancing golden particles. These sharp moments of sensory input, the taste of the stale bread, the metallic scent of the cooling tools, the bright wash of light, are what coalesce into the gentle drift towards sleep. They are the anchors holding your day together. Your awareness remains heightened despite the profound fatigue urging you toward rest. You are acutely aware of the subtle sounds that denote true quiet, the cessation of voices, the silencing of footsteps upon the dirt floor. You become a careful observer of the slow decline of ambient sound, noticing how even the whispers of wind seem to lose their volume as the night deepens. The shared darkness is not an empty void. It is a highly textured canvas painted by shadow and coolness. It has weight, the way velvet absorbs light. You feel yourself sinking into the mattress, allowing gravity and exhaustion to perform what is easiest, the act of surrender. You are suspended in this threshold state between day's effort and night's deep withdrawal, contained within the warmth shared, yet carefully divided, space of the bed. You think about how necessary this careful spacing is. The closeness that allows for whispered words or a touch when rising is inseparable from the defined boundary that ensures undisturbed slumber. It speaks to a profound understanding of human needs, the need to belong alongside others, and equally, the sacred requirement to be alone within oneself. This gentle negotiation becomes the deepest, quietest ritual of returning to sleep. The coolness begins to permeate your extremities first. Your fingers, resting near the edge of the blanket, feel the faint dampness clinging from the cool night air entering through a barely sealed crack in the wall. You focus on this simple physical sensation, the slight chill that needs warming, the gentle pressure needed to keep comfort contained. It is remarkably grounding. Slowly, deliberately, your thoughts loosen their grip on specific details. The names of people fade into generalized presence. The pattern of tiles on the floor dissolves back into a single, continuous texture. All that remains are the rhythms, the slow, measured slide of breath in and out, the steady thrumming quiet of the wood settling around you, the deep reassurance provided by the weight of shared darkness. You become less an active participant in the dwelling and more an integrated part of its subdued, enduring rhythm. Sleep waits patiently at the edge of awareness, pulled by the steady tide of fatigue, welcomed by the encompassing solace of the neighboring life, side by side, separated only by careful